He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean, what am I doing?" He says, "You don't put your suction shoes."
$200 million. That's the empire legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner left behind. But the question echoing through Hollywood isn't how he earned it. It's who will walk away with it now. On December 14th, 2025, Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were found dead at their Brentwood mansion under circumstances that immediately stunned the public. The person accused of direct involvement was their own son, Nick Reiner. Then came the revelation that turned shock into disbelief. A leaked will showed Nick was set to receive 70% of the estate, roughly $140 million. Here's where everything fractures. Under California law, anyone responsible for another person's death cannot inherit from them. So does Nick lose everything, or has a legal path been quietly carved that could allow him to keep the fortune? After the deaths of Rob and Michelle, the central question shifted fast. Not what Hollywood lost, but who survives this family on paper, and who is erased. In the early hours of December 14th, police flooded the Reiner family estate in Brentwood. A traditional New England-style home purchased by Rob in 1991 and valued between $10 and $13 million, became the center of an unfolding nightmare. Rob Reiner, 81, the mind behind When Harry Met Sally, The Princess Bride, and A Few Good Men, was gone. The circumstances remained murky. The property itself, nearly 11,000 square feet with gardens and a private pool, quickly transformed from a symbol of success into a sealed crime scene. Nick Reiner, the second son, was taken into custody that same day. He was accused of involvement in his parents' deaths. But the case didn't stop there. Attention turned to Rob Reiner's final will. Drafted 2 years earlier, its contents ignited outrage once leaked. Police activity intensified, headlines exploded, and disbelief spread across the film world. Then came the next shock. With Nick under arrest, the spotlight shifted to the estate itself. Rob had 4 children: Nick, Roy, Jake, and Tracy, his adopted daughter from a previous marriage. And according to leaked documents, the distribution Rob chose was one almost no one expected. This applies to cash real estate, assets in the family trust, and even life insurance policies. But here's the most controversial part. This law doesn't even require a criminal conviction to apply. A civil court could still enforce it if they believe there's more than a 50% chance that Nick intentionally caused the tragedy. However, Weisspart also revealed a jaw-dropping twist. A potential legal loophole that might change everything. The Slayer statute only applies when the act is proven to be intentional. So if Nick's defense team succeeds in arguing that he was not mentally competent at the time, the statute might not apply at all. That means if a court accepts that he acted without full awareness, technically speaking, he could still inherit every single penny. It's a possibility that's enraged the public and left. Many wondering if justice could ever truly be served, even if he's blood family. Nick Reiner doesn't have any special privileges before the law, but the most complex scenario is this. What if Nick Reiner is declared not criminally responsible due to mental illness? In this case, he might not be convicted of a crime, but the civil court could still apply the Slayer statute or declare that Nick doesn't have the capacity to manage the assets. This could lead to the assets being handed over to a guardian or held in a trust that Nick can't access. This is the point that makes it impossible to reach a quick conclusion even if there's a ruling about mental health. Meanwhile, all eyes have turned toward Nick Reiner, whose calm, almost calculated demeanor has baffled both reporters. And the public, despite facing some of the most serious criminal charges possible, Nick appears strangely composed and focused. His choice of defense lawyer sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Alan Jackson, one of Los Angeles' most powerful criminal defense attorneys. Known for representing huge names like Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein with legal fees reportedly exceeding $2,000 per hour. People were left wondering how could someone with no steady job and a long history of personal issues afford a legal dream team like that? Sources close to the case claim that Nick's strategy is crystal clear. He plans to center his entire defense around his mental health. His goal is to argue that his condition not only affects his sentencing, but could also protect his inheritance rights. If his defense works, it could mean that even under the Slayer statute, Nick might legally keep his 70% share of his parents' estate, an amount worth roughly $140 million. including the film copyrights and the Brentwood mansion itself. This restriction isn't limited to cash alone. It extends to real estate holdings, assets placed in family trusts, and even life insurance payouts. But here's where the situation becomes deeply controversial. The Slayer statute doesn't actually require a criminal conviction to take effect. A civil court can still enforce it if a judge believes there is a greater than 50% likelihood that Nick intentionally caused the deaths. That detail alone stunned many observers. Yet, attorney Shaw Weiss revealed an even more unsettling complication: a possible legal escape hatch that could change the entire outcome. The statute only applies if the act is deemed intentional. If Nick's defense successfully argues that he lacked mental competence at the time, the rule may not apply at all. In that scenario, if a court accepts that he acted without full awareness or intent, Nick could technically remain eligible to inherit the full estate. Every dollar, every property, every royalty. The idea has infuriated the public and left many questioning whether justice can truly be upheld when family and mental health defenses intersect. Nick Reiner holds no automatic protection under the law. But the most complex situation emerges if he is declared not criminally responsible due to mental illness. In that case, he may avoid a criminal conviction altogether. Even so, a civil court could still step in, either applying the Slayer statute independently or determining that Nick lacks the capacity to manage the assets himself. If that happens, the estate could be placed under the control of a court-appointed guardian or locked inside a trust that Nick cannot directly access. This is what makes the case nearly impossible to resolve quickly. Even a ruling related to mental health would not immediately clarify who ultimately controls the fortune. As this legal maze unfolds, attention has shifted squarely onto Nick Reiner himself. His demeanor has unsettled both reporters and the public. Despite facing some of the most serious charges imaginable, he appears unusually calm, controlled, and focused. That composure only intensified scrutiny when he unveiled his legal team. Nick hired Alan Jackson, one of Los Angeles' most formidable criminal defense attorneys. Jackson is known for representing high-profile figures like Kevin Spacey and Harvey Weinstein, with reported fees exceeding $2,000 per hour. The question came fast. How could someone without steady income and a troubled past afford representation at that level? Sources close to the case say the strategy is deliberate. Nick's defense is expected to center entirely on mental health, not just to influence sentencing, but potentially to shield his inheritance. If that argument succeeds, he could retain control over his 70% share, an estimated $140 million, including film rights and the Brentwood mansion itself. Rob's career shaped generations of film lovers. He co-founded Castle Rock Entertainment in 1987, the powerhouse behind classics like The Shawshank Redemption. When Harry Met Sally and A Few Good Men, the studio became a cornerstone of Hollywood's success, eventually sold to Ted Turner in a multi-million-dollar deal that secured Reiner's financial empire. Even after the sale, Rob continued to receive profits from his films, his legacy, paying dividends long after he slowed down his directing career. And then there was real estate, another cornerstone of his wealth. The Reiners' Brentwood estate wasn't just a house. It was a living archive of their lives together. Bought in 1991, the mansion spanned nearly 11,000 square feet, featuring lush gardens, a pool, and the kind of quiet luxury that only comes from a lifetime of work. Valued at over $10 to $20 million. It was the crown jewel of Rob's success and the site of his most heartbreaking final chapter. He also owned a Malibu Colony beachfront home, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in California. That property wasn't just a retreat. It was a gold mine earning hundreds of thousands in rental income during peak seasons. And before that, Rob's Beverly Hills investments had brought in millions more. Proof of his sharp instincts and unmatched drive piece by piece. Rob Reiner built not just a fortune, but a fortress. One meant to protect his family long after he was gone. Yet now that same fortune has become the weapon tearing them apart after the deaths of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle. The question isn't what Hollywood lost, it's who gets the right to inherit it all. And who will be legally erased from this family forever. In the most common legal scenario, if Nick Reiner is convicted, he'll be completely removed from the inheritance list. Rob Reiner's assets will either go to the remaining children, be distributed according to the will, and to trust, or be frozen until the legal process concludes. Even though he's blood family, Nick Reiner doesn't have any special privileges before the law. This applies to cash real estate, assets in the family trust, and life insurance. But what's the most complex scenario? What if Nick Reiner is declared not criminally responsible due to mental illness? In this case, he might not be convicted of a crime, but the civil court could still apply the Slayer statute or declare that Nick doesn't have the capacity to manage the assets. Rob's influence on cinema stretched across generations. In 1987, he co-founded Castle Rock Entertainment, a studio that would go on to shape modern film history. Under its banner came enduring classics like The Shawshank Redemption, When Harry Met Sally, and A Few Good Men. Castle Rock quickly became one of Hollywood's most respected production houses. And when it was later sold to Ted Turner for a massive sum, it solidified the financial foundation Reiner would rely on for decades. Even after stepping back from directing, Rob's work continued to generate steady income. Royalties flowed from his films year after year, proof that his creative legacy never stopped working for him. Beyond film, real estate became another pillar of his wealth. The Brentwood estate wasn't just a residence. It was a personal archive of his life with Michelle. Purchased in 1991, the home spanned nearly 11,000 square feet. Surrounded by manicured gardens, a pool, and the kind of understated luxury earned over a lifetime. Valued between $10 and $20 million. It stood as both the crown jewel of Rob's success and the setting of his most devastating final chapter. He also owned a beachfront property in the exclusive Malibu Colony, one of California's most coveted neighborhoods. That home wasn't only a retreat. It generated substantial rental income during peak seasons. Earlier investments in Beverly Hills real estate had already brought in millions, reinforcing Rob's reputation for sharp instincts and long-term vision. Piece by piece, he didn't just accumulate wealth. He built a safeguard for his family's future. Now, that same fortune has become the force tearing the family apart. After the deaths of Rob Reiner and Michelle, the focus shifted from loss to inheritance. The question is no longer what Hollywood lost, but who will ultimately receive everything, and who may be legally cut out forever. In the most straightforward legal outcome. If Nick Reiner is convicted, he would be completely barred from inheriting. The estate would either be redistributed among the remaining children, placed into trust, or frozen until all proceedings conclude. Blood relation alone offers no protection under the law. This includes cash, property, trust assets, and insurance. But the most complicated possibility remains. If Nick is ruled not criminally responsible due to mental illness, he may avoid conviction. Even then, a civil court could still intervene, applying inheritance restrictions, or placing the assets under strict control. That outcome could place the assets under the control of a court-appointed guardian or lock them inside a trust Nick cannot freely touch. This is the point where the case stops offering clear answers. Even with a ruling tied to mental health, there is no fast resolution. Legal experts agree on one thing. If Nick Reiner is convicted, there is no path that allows him to personally enjoy the full inheritance. The law exists to prevent exactly this kind of scenario. And according to the leaked documents, Rob Reiner made choices few people expected. Those closest to the family have said Rob and Michelle lived entirely for their children, always placing family above fame or fortune. Now that same devotion has collapsed into public heartbreak as the family they built so carefully fractures in full view of the world. So why has money become the center of this story? Because in cases involving family tragedy, financial motive is impossible to ignore. And because Rob Reiner wasn't just a beloved filmmaker. He was a man whose work generated hundreds of millions of dollars, whose real estate holdings spanned some of California's most valuable neighborhoods, and whose assets were structured through complex trusts. That makes inheritance unavoidable in the investigation. Reports indicate that authorities have traced portions of Nick's legal expenses to funds he controlled before his parents' deaths. Trust accounts, savings, and other holdings are now under scrutiny. If accurate, it suggests preparation that began long before the tragedy itself. That possibility has stunned the public. The idea that love, law, and legacy could be shaped into instruments of protection or profit is deeply unsettling. Psychologists remain divided. Some see Nick as both victim and aggressor, shaped by addiction, mental illness, and years of inner conflict. Others believe the behavior appears too calculated to dismiss. The line between illness and intent has blurred, leaving even experts uncertain where compassion should end and accountability must begin. District Attorney Nathan Hochman has described cases like this as among the most painful to prosecute. Families are pulled in opposite directions, forced to grieve while navigating legal realities. The Reiner story has shifted from Hollywood dream to cautionary tale. Love, once its greatest strength, has become the battlefield. What began as devotion has ended in division, leaving the world watching and asking how it ever reached this point. People are left asking how a family built on love and legacy could fall this far. Was Rob's limitless compassion the very thing that undid everything? Did his generosity quietly open doors that should have stayed closed? Or is this simply proof that even the strongest families can collapse under the combined weight of money, grief, and unresolved pain? Piece by piece, Rob Reiner didn't just accumulate wealth. He built a fortress meant to shelter the people he loved most. That fortress was designed to protect his family long after he was gone. Yet now, the same fortune has become the force pulling them apart. Rob's words echo with cruel irony. Family always comes first. Cherish one another. Never let money destroy what truly matters. Those sentiments now linger in the background of conference rooms where siblings sit across from one another, surrounded by attorneys, signatures, and quiet resentment. Roy once told friends that their parents never walked away, no matter how hard things became. Both Roy and Jake have described their father not only as a parent, but as a companion. Someone who laughed easily, offered guidance without judgment, and showed up when it mattered most. The investigation remains ongoing, and District Attorney Nathan Hochman has acknowledged that cases involving family members are among the most painful and complex the legal system faces. He has compared the situation to the Menendez brothers case, one of the most infamous family tragedies in American history. The Reiner siblings are being pulled in opposite directions, forced to grieve the loss of both parents while also confronting the impossible question of how to respond to a brother whose mental health is now central to the case. Balancing loyalty, fear, and responsibility has become an emotional minefield. Even Tracy, caught in the center of the inheritance battle, has reportedly admitted through tears that the conflict contradicts everything their parents tried to teach them. Unity, compassion, family before ego. Those values now feel painfully distant as legal arguments replace private conversations. The unanswered questions continue to linger. Can a family recover once trust has been fractured this deeply? Should illness outweigh accountability, or does responsibility remain regardless of intent? The Reiner story no longer feels like a private tragedy. It has become a mirror, forcing uncomfortable conversations about love, limits, and what happens when devotion collides with power and wealth. What remains is not a clean ending, but a quiet reckoning. A reminder that legacy is fragile, and that even the strongest foundations can crack when silence, grief, and money collide.